conscience is not inherent in us from birth and is not a basic instinct. How and when does it develop? We decided to check the honesty of 4 preschool children. Is it easy for children to ignore their conscience? The psychologist gave the children an almost impossible task: to pass table tennis balls from one bowl to another using only a flat spatula.
So, I'm going to give you one task that each and every one of you needs to perform in turns. See, we have all these balls in this bowl right here, and you need to use this spatula, and then you put 3 balls in this cup without using your hands, just the spatula. And whoever performs this task right shall get a very nice, very awesome prize. All right, everybody understand what to do?
Each time the adults left and the child was left alone to complete the task. To watch the children, cameras were running. The children were put in a difficult situation. Psychologists call this a conflict of motives. On the one hand, every child would love to complete the task and get a prize. On the other hand, they were faced with rules that they had to adhere to.
Children want to be praised. They want to get some sort of reward, right? It's psychological stroking, which is required from one parent or from a different adult to show that they're good. This is because they're doing something that's important for them. And it's great to be positive and great to be praised.
3 children decided to be honest. They did not break the rules and did not shuffle the balls using their hands. Some participants were not able to cope with their own emotions.
You didn't use your hands, and for this you deserve the prize. Here you go. Is a wonderful gingerbread bear. There you go. You're great. Don't cry.
But not all were honest. The last one to participate in the test, Nikita, decided to cheat and broke the rules. Nikita's desire to complete the task and win a prize was stronger than the need to comply with the set conditions. Nevertheless, this is an exception. Most children approach honesty very seriously.
Guys, so you had the opportunity, while no one was watching, to move those balls into the empty cup using your hands. But why didn't you? Because it's necessary to do everything honestly. And if we do it honestly, only then we deserve the prize. You wanted to do everything honestly, right? Right. You are all honest. You are wonderful young people. A child, strictly speaking, is a conscientious being because they're innocent. They haven't yet understood the world, society, teachers, parents. They haven't adjusted to them. They haven't lost themselves, so they react based on principles. They're honest.
Psychologists call conscience the inner parent. To make it easier to control their child, mom and dad teach the concept of good and bad. Once the things that were prohibited by parents become personally necessary, conscience has been formed. As a person gets older, they outgrow the rules taught to them. This begins to happen in adolescence.
This is a specific and definite stage of personal development. Their inner voice, it somehow gives them justification. And look at teenagers. They grow up, they do God knows what, and they feel they're always right.
Later, a person develops an internal and personal philosophy and attitude towards life. After developing spiritually, they develop parental norms to formulate and develop their own uniqueness. Conscience becomes an invisible self-monitoring tool. Nevertheless, is it as abstract and invisible as it seems? St. Petersburg, Institute of the Human Brain. Here, conscience was first shown to the world. Its mechanism is based on the so-called error detector. The brain is constantly monitoring whether all human actions correspond to a usual pattern. And it signals if we do something wrong. For example, if you suddenly left the iron turned on or any device and did not notice that, you leave the house and you begin to have a feeling of anxiety. You come back and you can see that yes, indeed something is wrong. That's the mechanism. It signals that something is wrong. You are doing something inappropriate. It is, so to speak, the basis for us to take a closer look at our own actions. That is, it is a self-control mechanism. Scientists set out to investigate how the error detector works when deliberately deviating from the norm. For example, we do it when we lie while pursuing a selfish goal. In other words, we ignore our own conscience. Well, imagine, for example, that you need to fool someone. To, I don't know, get some benefit out of something. Maybe it's money, or to show yourself in a positive light no matter where you are. So we pose this question: how will this mechanism work in detecting errors in a situation where someone is obviously acting incorrectly? And will it be personally beneficial to that person? The scientists created the experimental conditions under which lying would be beneficial. The subjects were asked to cheat using a computer program. If successful, the person would receive a reward. Right now on the monitor screen, the up arrow or down arrow will appear. You'll be playing against the computer. Your job is to try to deceive it. How? Well, when the arrow appears on the monitor, the computer does not know which direction the arrow is facing. You offer your own variant, and the computer will begin thinking whether to agree with you or not. If it agrees with your answer, and if this answer is false, then you win. An electroencephalograph was connected to a man, a device that measures the electrical activity of the brain. Scientists measure its peaks during the exercise. Green graph is a reaction to honesty, and a red graph a reaction to deceit. We can see a significant difference. We can see where it is located. Here is a reflection of how the error detection mechanism works, so to speak, on deception. We are able to detect the reaction. As it turns out, our brain perceives a deliberate lie as a deviation from the norm. This is necessary so that a person does not end up believing in their own deceptions. Such a natural detector does not keep one from engaging in dishonest behavior, but instead at least prevents the individual from deriving pleasure from it. We cannot interfere with how this mechanism works, which is why we cannot derive pleasure from doing unscrupulous things. Well, if a person, so to speak, has a sense of conscience, if it is fixed in the way they interact with things, then this does not mean that a person will not act deceptively. They can act that way, but will they really enjoy doing it? That is to say, will they perceive it as just a natural course which does not work because it goes against the norm? Meaning going against what they know is good and what is bad. Every person has an internal self-supervision system, and that means that there are no dishonest people. However, such a mechanism works differently from individual to individual. It depends on the way they are brought up as well as on culture. For example, Europeans regard cannibalism as totally unacceptable, but for some African tribes, it is considered the norm. A person cannot control their error detector, but they can dull its effect. Scientists have shown that under the influence of alcohol, the body reacts in a different way. Inappropriate actions cease to be perceived as something wrong. This is why we see that people are very often able to conduct themselves in a somewhat inappropriate manner, but when they sober up, they start acting properly again. They therefore are able to perform actions while intoxicated that they would otherwise consider improper when they are sober. These are not pangs of conscience as such, but rather a feeling of guilt to oneself. Therefore, conscience develops together with the creation of personality. No person can be considered unscrupulous, but what can make people act in ways that are against their moral principles, and on the other side, what makes them adhere to the standards of decency? Here will be 3 pieces right now. One factor that can affect our conscience is the opinion of others. A simple experiment with pizza demonstrates that people are more inclined to be selfish when they are alone. That is so little.
Uh-huh.
After cutting the pizza into unequal pieces, we invited people into the studio who, by their own admissions, were quite hungry. Each person would wait for their turn to come to the table and collect one piece of pizza. That is, no one else was standing and watching how they would behave. The participants were warned beforehand that the pizza was meant for a large number of people. However, they all chose the biggest piece available, ignoring the smallest. For the second part of the experiment, we invited another group of people. They also wanted to have something to eat. But this time, they were invited to the table all together at the same time. When it was time to share the unequal pieces, social norms suddenly emerged. The younger lads were trying not to take the biggest pieces for themselves, but gave the girls the right to choose their pizza pieces first. The boys looked at the feedback from the girls. Was there some awkwardness? Were there some issues connected with the assessment, with the subconscious assessment of society? How the other members of the team looked at you? And note that it was done at a subconscious level, and this now brings us to a very important point. It is imperative for one to look at how well society gauges your conduct. Based on this, we say that social and philosophical concepts are also conscience. Therefore, conscience is an internal controller that everyone has. Nevertheless, the peculiarity of the way an individual is brought up, as well as personal qualities, make a person react differently to their desires. People who conduct themselves the same way when they are alone compared to within a particular society do so individually. Each individual has their own array of moral standards. In the event that the individual deviates from them, they experience feelings of remorse or guilt. What is this, and how is it different from shame? A person has repented for what they have done. That is, they feel remorse for having committed this act. This concerns an individual's internal state. At this point, the person usually lowers their head, retreats back into their inner self, and begins to experience emotion, as well as a pronounced form of shame, which comes out as shame when a person raises their hand, trying to cover themselves. It is precisely this gesture that separates man from his societal environment. Shame occurs only in the presence of witnesses. This is a feeling associated with the fear of being rejected, of not being accepted by society. Shame can arise in cases when we are different from others. Children have a desire to conform, to be like everyone else, which is more than an adult. A simple test called sweet salty porridge proves it. The experiment requires a plate of porridge. The experimenter sprinkles one half with sugar, the other with salt. The children were not made aware of this arrangement.
So, guys, we're now going to try out some porridge with you, and you have to say whether it's sweet, whether you like it. Okay? For real? Of course for real. So, you try it. Come on. Well done. So, how was the porridge? Tasty, sweet? Sweet. Phew. There you go. He said disgusting. No, it's delicious and sweet. Perfect.
The experimenter instructed 3 children to try the sweet porridge. Then a 4th girl, Evelyn, got a spoon of salty porridge. The girl obviously felt that the porridge was not sweet like the other kids were saying, but she did not want to admit this.
The feeling of shame is a very social feeling that develops within society. And when people feel that they belong to a particular social group, they feel safer. But at the same time, they also become more vulnerable. So when the 3 little kids were told that they had been given some sweet porridge, even though Eveline had been given salty porridge, it was very hard for her to admit that her porridge was actually salty. She preferred to say the same thing as everyone else, that she too got sweet, tasty porridge.
Therefore, shame is a purely social concept. It can only be experienced when a person deviates from the accepted norms of morality and ethics. Pangs of conscience, on the other hand, are a purely intimate feeling that makes itself felt in solitude and consumes the person from the inside. Suppressed feelings of guilt can cause serious disorders in the nervous system, such as anxiety and phobias. Perhaps it would be better for us not to have a conscience.
Certainly, being decent, good, conscientious, honest, and moral is extremely disadvantageous. Because it's always a game against one's own convenience, against one's own comfort. How would you live in a way that's convenient and at the same time uncomfortable?
Nevertheless, what would our society have looked like if we were never tormented by twinges of conscience, and if our behavior was not controlled by shame? Deception and betrayal, crime and violence, hypocrisy and fear. Shame and conscience are the mechanisms that protect us from our inert animal instincts. They are our inner advisors that help us to develop and achieve harmony and understand the meaning of life.